The gunshot cracked through the marble hallway before Amina Okafor could turn her head. She realized three things in the same breath. The man who had just shoved her behind him was Kang Min-jae, the disabled Mafia boss she had married 11 days ago. The wheelchair he was supposed to depend on was rolling backward, empty, into the wall, and the bodyguard bleeding out on the imported carpet at their feet had been aiming at her, not at him, which meant the ticking clock she thought she had bought her family had just run out 3 years early. "Down," Min-jae said. That was all. One word. No urgency in it, only instruction, the way a surgeon might say scalpel. She dropped. He did not. He stood over her, a black silhouette against the chandelier, and she saw for one impossible second the outline of a man who moved like nothing on this earth was allowed to touch him. He fired twice. Something heavy hit the ground beyond the doorway. The house went quiet. "Get up, wife," he said, and offered her his hand, not the trembling hand she had held at their wedding, a steady one. "We have less than a minute before the second team arrives. Do you want to live?" "Yes," she said. "Then do exactly what I say." Hey, Storm Riders. Welcome back to Midnight Ink Stories. Before this tale drags you under, tap that subscribe button and switch on notifications, because what unfolds in the next 20 minutes will hollow out your chest and refuse to give it back. Now let's go. 11 days earlier, Amina had been kneeling on the polished floor of the marriage registrar's office in Yungu, pressing her thumbprint into a document she had not been allowed to read in full. The ink had smelled of lemon and iron. Her hand had not shaken, because she had spent 3 weeks teaching it not to. Her father, 71 years old and thin as a reed since the stroke, had watched from a wheelchair across the room with an expression she could not decipher. Her younger brother, Chuka, 22, had not been permitted to attend. They had told her it was a security precaution. She understood, without being told, that it was leverage. The lawyer sliding the document toward her wore a black suit and the calm of a man who had processed 100 women like her. He said nothing about the language on page 4, which promised her permanent residency inside the Kang estate. He said nothing about the appendix, which listed her father's outstanding hospital bills, her brother's tuition, and the loan sharks who had been circling the family's small restaurant on Itaewon Row since spring. All of them paid the moment her thumb hit the paper. He simply gathered the pages, bowed, and gestured toward a black car waiting at the curb. She had not looked back at her father. She had not been able to. The drive to the Kang estate had taken 47 minutes. She had counted them, because counting was the only weapon she had left. The car turned off the main road onto a private lane lined with tall walls, then through a wrought iron gate stamped with a crest of 2 crossed tigers. The lane curved through a pine grove. At the end of it, the estate rose out of the earth like a fortress pretending to be a home. Black stone, white columns, windows that did not open, guards who did not look at her. Inside, a woman in a slate-gray hanbok waited, Madame Kang Hyun-ok, mother of the groom. She was small, 60-something, silver hair swept into a tight low knot, and her eyes moved across Amina's dark skin, natural hair, and simple ivory dress with the calm of a jeweler pricing a stone she had no intention of buying. "You are late," she said in perfect English. "I apologize, Aomioni," Amina answered, in perfect Korean. The old woman's mouth thinned. She had not expected the Korean. She had, Amina understood at once, expected to be able to insult her freely in her own house. "You will not call me that," Madame Kang said, switching languages back. "You may call me Madam. That will do." Amina bowed the exact 8-degree bow her mother had taught her 30 years ago in a small kitchen in Lagos, and repeated in Seoul 1,000 times since, and she did not look up until she was told to. She was taken to a wing of the mansion so quiet she could hear the electricity in the walls. Her rooms were 3, a sitting room, a bedroom, and a bath. Everything in cream and gold. a bed she could have fit her entire family into, a closet already filled with clothes cut to a body someone had measured without ever meeting her. On the small writing desk lay a single sealed envelope. Inside was a photograph of her father in a hospital bed, with a private nurse adjusting his IV, dated that morning. A photograph of her brother in a university uniform, dated that morning. A photograph of the restaurant on Itaewon Rose with a new sign above the door, and no men in leather jackets loitering outside. She had bought their lives with her name. She had not yet met her husband. She met him 3 hours later, at dinner. He was wheeled into the dining room by a young attendant. He wore a black shirt, black trousers, no jacket, no tie. His hair was black and cut short. His face was 35 years old, sharp at the jaw, unlined, unreadable. His hands rested on the armrests of the chair as though placed there by someone else. His eyes were the color of wet slate, and they moved over her the way a man might move his gaze over a room he had not decorated himself. "Sit," he said. She sat. "Eat," he said. She ate. He did not eat. He watched her eat. Halfway through the meal, he spoke again. "Your father made lamb tagine on Sundays when you were a child. Your mother taught you Yoruba lullabies. You studied applied mathematics at Yonsei until your second year, when the family's finances collapsed. You worked as a bookkeeper for a shipping company in Busan for 11 months before returning to help at the restaurant. You have never been in love. You have never been arrested. You have twice been offered marriages of convenience to older Nigerian businessmen and refused both. Is any of this incorrect?" She set her chopsticks down. "Have you been reading a file or have you been reading me?" He did not smile, but something behind his eyes moved, briefly, like a fish beneath a still pond. "A file. And now, you." "Then let me save you time," she said. "The file will tell you I do not scare easily. I have already been scared. There is a floor to it. You will not find anything new down there." His fingers tightened once on the armrest of the chair. He did not answer her. He gestured for the attendant. The attendant wheeled him out. She would not see him again for 3 days. The mansion breathed around her at night. Cold currents through unseen vents, the ticking of a clock somewhere deep in the wall, the faint hum of the elevator that connected the 4 above-ground floors to whatever lay beneath them. She learned the household by walking it. She learned the names of the maids who lowered their eyes when she passed. She learned the names of the guards who did not. She learned that Madame Kang took her tea at 4 in the afternoon in a sunroom that faced east. She learned that Min Jae's uncle, Chairman Kang Do-seung, arrived at the estate every second morning in a black Mercedes and stayed inside a study on the second floor for exactly 90 minutes. She learned, most importantly, that no one in the house looked at her the way people looked at a wife. On the 5th night, at 3 in the morning, she heard the footsteps. They came from below her. She lay in the dark and counted them. They were heavy. They were even. They moved with the steady, weighted rhythm of a man who was not favoring one leg over the other. They moved with the rhythm of a man who was not sitting down. She did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next night, she followed them. The elevator required a key card. The service stairs did not. She had, in her 3rd week as a bookkeeper in Busan, learned to move quietly through unfamiliar buildings, and the skill returned to her now. She descended 3 flights. She reached a corridor she had not known existed. At its far end was a door with a red light above it, and from beyond that door came the sound of impact, breath, and controlled violence. She pushed the door open 1 careful centimeter. Inside a low, wide room lined with mirrors, Kang Min-jae was fighting 3 men at once. He was barefoot. He was shirtless. His chest was crossed by a starburst of scar tissue over his sternum, the exact place a bullet would have entered him 3 years ago. He moved the way water moves down a channel it has cut itself, and he moved fast, and he moved without any trace of a wound. One of the men went down. Another, The third. He straightened. He wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist, and without turning his head, he said, in the same low, even voice he had used across the dinner table, "Come in, wife. You've been standing in that doorway for 11 seconds." Her body would not obey her, her hand still on the door, her breath high in her chest. He turned then. He walked toward her. He walked. He crossed the room in 7 strides and stopped a meter from her face, and she saw for the first time up close that his eyes were not slate at all. They were the color of a river before a storm. "You lied," she said. "I let people believe. That is different." "It is not. It is when they are trying to kill you." He watched her. He did not touch her. He waited for her to run or scream or slap him. She did none of those things. She was Amina Okafor, and she had spent the last 3 weeks preparing to bury feelings deeper and darker than surprise. "For how long?" she asked. 3 years. "And your mother believes what I have wanted her to believe. And me." He was quiet for a long moment. "I owe you an apology, Amina," he said. "I chose you because you were needed. I did not choose you because you deserved this. Those are 2 different sentences. I will not blur them." She did not answer him for a full minute. Then she said in a voice she barely recognized, "Then tell me what you actually need me to do, because I have paid too much to be a decoration." He looked at her. He smiled, not with his mouth, with something at the corner of his eyes. "You will not be a decoration." 3 days later, at breakfast, Madame Kang set her spoon down with the specific delicacy of a woman about to draw blood. "Amina Yang," she said, "there is a small matter with the household accounts. Our head accountant, Choi Sun-sengnim, has misplaced 412 million won across the family's charitable holdings. He is a good man. He is old. Perhaps his eyes are failing. My son suggests we bring in outside auditors, but that would embarrass Choi Sun-sengnim, and I am reluctant to shame a man who has served this family for 30 years. Perhaps since you studied numbers at Yonsei before your unfortunate circumstances, you could look at the ledgers for us, as a family kindness." It was a trap. Amina knew it was a trap the way she knew rain from a clear sky. If she refused, she was arrogant. If she accepted and found nothing, she was incompetent. If she accepted and found something, she was accusing an elder in a house that ate elders' accusers for breakfast. She smiled. She bowed the 8 degrees. She said in Korean gentle enough to embroider, "It would be my honor, madam, perhaps a spreadsheet by tomorrow evening." The ledgers came in 14 bound volumes. She worked through them from 9 in the morning until 3 the next morning. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She used 2 mechanical pencils and a calculator, and she used her father's method, the method of a man who had spent 40 years balancing tiny African restaurants in a foreign country, of cross-checking the small entries, because the small entries were the ones people forgot to falsify. By midnight, she had found it. It was elegant. It was almost beautiful. Choi Sun-sengnim had not misplaced the money. He had never had it. Someone had entered 49 transactions across 3 years, each perfectly reasonable in isolation, each routed through a subcontractor called Bright Dawn Cultural Foundation, which existed on paper and nowhere else. The subcontractor's registered address, when she cross-referenced it against the Seoul Commercial Registry at 2 in the morning, was a rented mailbox in Yeonggu, whose lease had been paid for out of a personal account belonging to Madame Kang Hyun-ok. Amina sat for a long time with that piece of paper in her lap. She could hand it to Minjai. She could bury it. She could confront the old woman across the breakfast table. She did none of the 3. She wrote a clean, dry, 20-page report. She named no thief. She marked the 49 transactions with red asterisks. She noted their common routing. She noted the mailbox. She did not name the person on the lease. She dropped the report on Madame Kang's writing desk before dawn, and she left a small handwritten note clipped to the front. "Madam, In case Choi Son-seung-nim is truly at fault, this may help him. In case he is not, this may help us. A. Madame Kang did not speak to her for 3 days. On the 4th, at breakfast, the old woman said, without looking up from her kanji, "You are more useful than I expected." Amina bowed. "Thank you, madam." That night, she found a single white orchid on the pillow beside hers. There was no note. There did not need to be. The Kang family autumn banquet fell 3 weeks into the marriage. 200 guests, politicians, chaebol heirs, 2 ambassadors, a retired prime minister. Amina wore a gown chosen by Madame Kang, cut in a burgundy silk that flattered nothing about her, but had clearly been selected to make sure she stood out as the wrong color in every photograph. She let it. She wore, underneath it, a small pendant her mother had sent from Lagos hidden against her collarbone, a bronze tortoise the size of a thumbnail. Her mother had said, when she pressed it into her hand at the airport 6 years ago, that the tortoise wins because the tortoise is patient. Min-jae was wheeled in beside her. He held her hand for the cameras. His grip was neither too tight nor too gentle. His grip said, "We are performing." Halfway through the 3rd course, a woman in a lilac gown leaned across the table with the specific smile of a person about to draw blood in public. Her name was Yoo Min-ji, and she had, according to the file Amina had memorized, been engaged to Min-jae 10 years ago, before an unspecified disgrace ended the arrangement. "Amina-si," she said sweetly in Korean, and then, in English, "I do apologize. I understand your Korean is limited, but I wanted to compliment you personally. It is so brave of you to marry into a family like ours. So many of your compatriots come here as, what is the word, entertainers. It is refreshing to meet one who found a more direct path." The table went quiet in the specific way tables went quiet when a knife had been laid across the tablecloth. Amina lifted her wine glass. She sipped. She set it down. She smiled the small, warm smile she had used on the men who came to collect from her father's restaurant in the last bad summer, the smile that had never once been about warmth. "You see," she said, in Korean, in the careful high register reserved for elders and speeches. "You are kind to notice my journey. My grandmother used to say that a person's path is not judged by where it begins, but by the load it carries. You are, of course, an authority on carrying loads, given the 10 years you have carried the memory of a wedding that did not happen. My compliments on your endurance. It is truly refreshing." The table did not laugh. It did something better. It exhaled. Yoo Min-ji's face went white. At the head of the table, Kang Min-jae picked up his wine glass with a hand that trembled only very slightly, and Amina, who had grown up watching her mother read men in dining rooms across 2 continents, understood that the tremor was not a symptom of any injury he had ever suffered. It was laughter, suppressed. She had made him laugh in public for the first time in 3 years, and the woman across the table had lost the room in the same breath. Later that night, in the corridor outside their private wing, he touched her wrist. It was the first time he had touched her outside the presence of witnesses. "You were dangerous tonight," he said quietly. "I was raised by dangerous women. I would like to meet them. You will. My mother will not like you. She has never approved of any man who wore black shoes to a first meeting. What color should I wear?" "Oxblood." "Understood." He let go of her wrist. He did not, this time, get back into the chair immediately. He stood in the corridor a moment longer, watching her the way a man watches something he has not yet given himself permission to want. Then he sat, and she pushed him back to his rooms, and she did not know until she was alone again with her own reflection in the mirror that her hands were trembling too. The first attempt came 4 nights later. The estate was quiet. Amina was in the library on the 2nd floor, reading a book of Yoon Dong-ju's poems that she had found on Min-jae's shelf, when the lights went out. She rose. The emergency lamps came up 10 seconds later, dim red along the baseboards. She walked toward the door. She never reached it. She heard the first shot from the west wing, then the second, closer, then footsteps that were not the household's footsteps, and she ducked behind an armchair. Her breath was suddenly under her jaw. She had once, in her third year of university, taken a self-defense class taught by a bored-retired policeman in a rented Anson gym. She remembered exactly one thing from that class. If the man has a gun and you cannot run, put something between him and you and wait for him to be closer than his gun. She waited. The library door opened. The man who stepped through it was not a guard. He was tall, in a dark hooded jacket, and the pistol in his hand was fitted with a suppressor. He scanned the room. His eyes passed over the armchair. He turned toward the desk. Amina was already moving. She hit him in the throat with the spine of the book of Yoon Dong-ju's poems, hard, using the corner of the book the way her Ansan instructor had shown her to use the corner of a phone. He gagged. She grabbed the desk lamp with her other hand and swung. The lamp caught him at the temple. He went down. His gun skittered across the floor. She kicked it under the desk. She was reaching for the door when she felt an arm around her waist. She did not scream. She elbowed. The arm tightened. "Amina!" Min Jae's voice, low, in her ear. He pulled her behind him and put his own body between her and the doorway. She smelled, absurdly, the faint tea and cedar scent of his shirt. "I am fine," she whispered. "I know." "How did you know I was here?" "Because I know where you are at every hour." "That is deeply concerning." "We can discuss my concerning behavior after we survive the next 4 minutes." He drew a pistol from a hidden holster at his back. He fired once at the doorway. Something behind the door stopped moving. He put his free hand briefly against her cheek. It was not a gesture calculated for a camera. There were no cameras. His hand was warm and rough, and it was the first time in 23 days she had been touched by a man who was neither a doctor nor a threat, and it undid her in a way the gunshot had not. "Stay behind me. Do not run until I run." She nodded. They made it out. The rest of the household was already in motion, security teams sweeping the wings, Madame Kang locked in a panic room, guards herding the maids toward the underground shelter. 2 of the intruders were dead. 3 had been captured. When Baek Do-ha, Min Jae's head of internal security, arrived at 3 in the morning to report, his face was gray. The signal that had disabled the estate's outer perimeter had come from inside the house. It had been transmitted from a phone registered to Chairman Kang Do-sung, Min Jae's uncle. If your chest is tight and your hands are still on the phone because you cannot look away, hit that subscribe button right now, because the twist coming next will absolutely level you. Trust me, stay with us. Min Jae did not sleep that night. Amina did not either. They sat together in his private study on the 4th floor, a room she had not been permitted to enter before that night, and he told her, in a low voice that broke twice and repaired itself each time, the parts of his life he had never told anyone. He told her about his first fiancé, Han Seo-yeon, whom the family had buried without a body 3 years ago. He told her he had loved her the way a young man loves the first person who takes him seriously. He told her he had walked into the parking garage of a hotel in Yongsan-gu on the night of what was supposed to be their engagement dinner, and he had known, 1 heartbeat before the bullets, that Seo-yeon was already in a black car pulling away, that she had left him there for someone else to finish, and that she had not looked back. He told her he had spent 3 years playing a broken man because the enemy inside his family had needed him broken to be careless. He told her, in a voice that did not shake and did not soften, "I chose you because a file said you were honest, and I have not been near an honest person in a long time. I did not choose you because I hoped you would forgive me, or love me, or stay. But I would like to say, out loud once, that I did hope." She reached across the low table between them. She did not answer with words. She put her hand into his. He closed his fingers around it. His grip was steady. His grip was, for the first time since she had met him, the grip of a man who had allowed himself to hold on to something. Drop a comment right now and tell me. Do you think Min Jae actually loves her, or is Amina just another asset he cannot afford to lose? I read every single comment. Every one. He kissed her then. It was not the kiss of a man who had planned a kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had run out of arguments against one. Her mouth was warm and unafraid, and his mouth was cool, and she thought, with a small, distant part of her mind that was still a Yonsei mathematics student solving a problem, that she had spent her whole life being asked to be smaller, and this was the first time in a very long time that a man had asked her silently to be exactly her size. She pulled back first. She placed her palm on the scar over his sternum. "You should have told me," she said, "about the wheelchair before the wedding." "I know. You will not lie to me again. I will not. Say it in Korean. Gyojitmal and Halge." Good. She heard herself laugh. She had not laughed in the house before. It sounded strange in her own throat. He kissed her forehead. He tasted faintly of green tea. He said, "There is one more thing." She waited. Seo Yeon is alive. The war began the next morning. Baek Do-ha brought the security footage from a customs breach at Incheon port. The face captured on frame 6 was thin, elegant, older by 3 years than the photograph on Min Jae's desk. Han Seo-yeon, in a charcoal coat and a small pearl earring, walking calmly through a private freight terminal at 4 in the morning, while a dozen crates that did not exist on any manifest moved onto a Panama-flagged ship behind her. She had built her own network. She had been building it since the night she left him for dead in the Yongsan parking garage. She had used the years everyone thought she was buried to buy politicians in 3 countries and route her operations through a shell company registered in Vanuatu. She had, according to the intelligence Baek's people had extracted from the surviving intruder, made an arrangement with Chairman Kang Do-sung to dismantle Min Jae from both sides. Do-sung would deliver the family, Seo-yeon would deliver the market, and behind them both, sitting in the sunroom that faced east and taking her tea at 4 every afternoon, was Madam Kang Hyun-ok, who had, according to the second flash drive by ex-technician cracked at 11 that morning, been the architect of the entire plan for 8 years, because she believed her son had become sentimental, and because she wanted the empire clean, and because she had never, in her long, careful life, permitted a thing she valued to remain in the hands of a person she considered unworthy of holding it. Min Jae read the drive in silence. He set it down. He looked at Amina. "You did not know," she said quietly. "Do not carry that." "She raised me." "She raised the boy she wanted, not the man you became." He looked at her for a long moment. He closed the drive in his fist and did not open his fist again for a full minute. The final confrontation took place on a Tuesday at 7 in the evening in a warehouse Han Seo-yeon owned through 5 shell companies in the port district of Incheon. She had, at 4 that afternoon, taken Amina from a market in Ansan while Amina was buying dried fish for her father. She had done it quietly. She had done it well. She had sent Min Jae a photograph of Amina in the back of a van and a message that read, "Your empire or your wife. You have 1 hour. I do not negotiate." She had underestimated exactly one thing. Amina had 6 days earlier, at Min Jae's careful suggestion, begun carrying a small button-sized transmitter sewn into the seam of her bra. It was not a tracking device, though Seo-yeon's people had swept her for those. It was a live microphone, routed through the encrypted server Baek Do-ha had built in the basement of the estate, and from the moment Amina had been shoved into the back of the van, every word Han Seo-yeon had spoken to her had been streaming in real time to a shared inbox at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, the Financial Services Commission, and 3 separate international press bureaus with whom Baek had cultivated relationships specifically for this evening. "Yes. Then these are not us." "No," he said, "they are not." The truth, when Baek Do-ha's people finally unearthed it in the archives of a defunct church shelter in Itaewon, was smaller and sadder than either of them had feared. 2 infants had been recovered in October 1999 from a shipping container intercepted at Incheon port. One had died of pneumonia within a week. The other had been placed with a family in Gwangju under a new name. Min Jae's mother, then in the early years of a private crusade she had never told her sons about, had photographed the babies in the clinic before their transfer and had recorded them in her private ledger under the names of the 2 children she herself had lost, Ji-ah, her daughter, and Amma, the daughter of the friend she had failed to save. She had done it, the ledger said, so that if anyone ever came looking for those little girls, they would be found. Not so that anyone would believe, 22 years later, that they were her own. Amara closed her eyes for a long moment. "Your mother," she said, was a better woman than either of them deserved. She was. She kept my name alive. She kept both of you alive. They sat for a while in the small tea room without speaking. The rain, which had been gentle when Amara arrived, thickened against the paper windows. Somewhere in the house below, a phone rang once and was answered. "I want to see him," Amara said quietly. "My father, please." "Tomorrow," Min-jae said. "He asked for 1 day to sleep in a bed. He has not slept in a bed since 1999. She nodded. She wiped her face again. She looked at him across the low table. "And what do you want, Kang Min-jae?" He looked at her. "I want," he said carefully, "to be a man who deserves to sit across from you 6 months from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, if that is what you decide. I do not know how to be that man yet. I have not been anything for 7 years, and before that I was not much worth being. But I would like the chance to try, if you will let me try." She looked at him for a long time, then very slowly she reached across the table and took his hand. Kwame Ose walked out of the Socho facility on a Thursday morning in early November. Amara flew up from Seoul to meet him. She wore the yellow raincoat from the photograph, a coincidence Grace Johnson had cried about on the phone the previous evening. Kwame was a tall man, thinner than he should have been, with kind eyes and a small tremor in his left hand that would, his doctor said, ease with time and food. He did not, when he saw her, speak. He simply held out both his hands and she put her face into them, and he stood there for a long time with his forehead pressed against the top of her head and his shoulders shaking silently. Grace Johnson flew in 4 days later. The three of them ate dinner together in a small restaurant in Hongdae on a rainy Saturday night. Grace, who had spent 25 years quietly refusing to remarry, and Kwame, who had spent 25 years quietly imagining a woman he had never met, sat across from each other in a booth by the window and did not, at first, say very much. Amara watched them. She thought, with a small ache and a small joy, that some stories were not hers to finish, and that the finishing of them was not required to be beautiful. Grace's cancer, the doctors in Nashville reported in December, was in full remission. The Beck Ho Group announced at the beginning of February the dissolution of its largest holding company. The public was told this was a restructuring. The truth, as reported 18 months later in an award-winning investigation by the Hankyoreh, was that Min-jae had personally overseen the transfer of $11 billion in shadow assets to a consortium of humanitarian foundations, 3 of which quietly reopened investigations into missing persons cases from the late 1990s. He also personally, and without fanfare, closed 6 shipping routes his father had opened. He replaced them with nothing. His father's ghost, if it had a ghost, did not, so far as anyone knew, complain. Hyun-woo was sentenced in April. He would not be out until his 50s. Han Soo-jin was extradited in June. Yoon Jae-hyun, the small silver-haired accountant, retired to a fishing village near Tongyong and was, by all reports, learning to paint. On a warm Saturday morning in early June, exactly 9 months after a cleaning robot had knocked a water pitcher off a cart on the 14th floor of Seongbuk Neural Research Hospital, Kang Min-jae parked a plain black sedan on Daeseguan Road and walked alone into a small restaurant 3 doors down from where Halmione's kitchen used to be. The restaurant was called Grace's Room. It was owned by a woman named Amara Johnson, who had reopened it 2 months earlier with the modest inheritance her mother had insisted on giving her, and who was, at that particular moment, standing behind the counter arguing gently in 3 languages with a supplier who had, once again, brought her the wrong kind of gochujang. She saw him. She stopped arguing. She handed the phone to her assistant. She wiped her hands on her apron. He walked to the counter. He set a small blue velvet box on the wood between them. He did not open it. He did not kneel. He did not, in fact, say a single one of the sentences he had rehearsed in front of the mirror in Namyangju that morning. 7 years in the dark, he said quietly, and the only time I ever actually woke up was the moment you walked into that room. Amara looked down at the box. She looked up at him. Her eyes were bright. "Kang Min-jae," she said. "You are a dramatic man." "I know. I've been waiting all week for you to come in and try the soup." "I know that too." She reached across the counter. She did not open the box. Not yet. She simply put her hand over his and left it there palm to palm, in the warm, bright kitchen of a small restaurant on a quiet Seoul street, where a photograph of a Ghanaian man and his American daughter and a Korean widow smiled from a frame above the register, and where somewhere, in a back room, a small speaker played very softly a Nashville woman singing a song she had not sung in public for 4 long years. Outside, the rain was gone. Sunlight fell across Daesaguan Road in wide, clean stripes. Inside, in a room that smelled of garlic and ginger and lemon peel and hope, the sleeping tiger of Seoul finally at last opened his eyes. If this story held you from the very first minute all the way to the last, do this one small thing. Smash that like button, share this video with someone who believes that quiet kindness can shake the world, and subscribe so you never miss the next story of danger, love, and impossible destiny. Tell us in the comments. If you had 1 minute alone in room 1408, what would you have whispered to the sleeping man on the bed? We read every single comment, and the story that wins our hearts might just become our next episode. Your next unforgettable story is only one click away.